Don't stop believing. That's kind of the theme. Don't stop believing. Sometimes at this juncture of the course, you might start feeling a little overwhelmed or stressed out, but don't stop believing in yourself. You've got what it takes. Okay, so here we go. Let's dive into the lecture for this week. We're still talking about the National Association for the Education of Young Children, Anti-Bias Education, and we're going to be exploring goal number 2, diversity. And I think one of the things I really want to share is how the anti-bias education goals really do cover our course objectives and your student learning objectives. And it also really helps us to take a deep dive into components of linguistically and culturally responsive approaches. And it showcases how our personal lived experiences and our social, cultural, political identities impact our teaching and our effectiveness. And it really is important that we really know who we are, because who we are determines how we work, how we teach. And so we have to be highly aware of our biases. We have to understand when we follow stereotype threats, because if we're not careful, we can limit the diversity happening in our classrooms, which really does affect our global, I want to say, not just, what it means to be a human being when we're not accepting diverse perspectives and people who are different than us to come in and support work. It also really affects our global economy when we're not taking into consideration everybody, right? We're not taking into consideration all different perspectives. We want to stay relevant, if we want to stay meaningful, and if we want to have hope. We really do have to be people that are truly dedicated to understanding how our life intertwines with other people's lives and what we can do to make this world work for the benefit of all people. Okay, all right, so we're getting into diversity, the importance of diversity. With this video, I have done a little kind of storyboard narrative for you all with some references, and you'll see that in the module for diversity. You'll be able to download that document, and all the references are there and things that I'll be talking about throughout this lecture. And you can follow along if you want, or you can watch this and then follow along later. It's up to you. All right, so we're going to go ahead, and I've got some friends with me. I've brought the Peanut Gang with me. I don't know which one you identify with. Sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit of each one of these characters, but we're going to be talking a lot just about impacts of media on children's minds and on ourselves too. And so the Peanuts are one of these really incredible kind of cartoons that's been a part of our, American culture for a couple decades now. And I think what's important about this is the creator of the Peanuts took, I want to say, an act of solidarity, if you will, and artivism, and created a Thanksgiving post. So if you can find it, put it in one of the discussions. I would love to see kind of what you all think about it. But why this is so meaningful to me is that we really can impact future generations based off of our expression of love through art, our expression of love through just being with people, breaking bread with people, playing music. There's just something about, for me, music that brings people together. Doesn't matter where we're from, in the sense of it's not a barrier for us to love one another and be connected through music. And so anyways, I like this because it's like, hey, let's jam together, let's all hang out, and we're really just vibing, and it doesn't matter anything about who you are, where you come from. It's just that you're a human being. So the Peanut Gang's going to hang out with us for this presentation. But anyways, if you want to do a little cool Google search and find out how artivism, because when we're talking about this in our justice module, talking about it a lot in our activist goal module, but it's something cool just to think about how media really does impact how people perceive others. And so there's some opportunities to kind of weigh in about diversity in media and the importance of representation of that. All right, Peanuts, let's get going. Here we go. So our course objectives. Now, I think this is really important because one thing about course objectives is sometimes as students, you might feel a little bit disconnected, right? About some of these course objectives, they may not necessarily make sense. So I try my best to bring the course objectives to life in the articles I choose, as well as my lectures, so you can really understand it. So when we're talking about the course objectives, we're going to be looking at for this diversity module. These are the two. Critically assesses the components. So this is the course objective. This is for me as your instructor. I am really trying to get us to critically assess the components of linguistically and culturally relevant. Okay, what's in linguistically and culturally relevant, because oftentimes we're toggling between things that what used to be, maybe something that we kind of perceive how it should be, like an idealist mindset, rather than focusing on what's actually relevant right now. In between those two worlds of what used to be, what we hope it to be, there is the now, there is the present, and that's the relevant part. But it does come from those two places of where we've been, what we've learned, what we did well, what we want to take into the future, and how we take that relevant information and make sure we're building curriculum and learning environments for children that are inclusive, they're developmentally age appropriate, right? So I'll give you a quick example of a learning environment. Age appropriateness. We would not have marbles, or should not have marbles, you know, those little marbles for infants and toddlers under 2 to be playing with. Somebody just shout out why. It's a choking hazard. Okay, right. So that's the developmentally age appropriate, you know, actual physical item in the classroom. But I remember growing up with marbles. I got so excited about marbles. And I remember when I first started teaching, I worked with school-age children, so 6 to 12 years old. And I brought marbles in for us to play with the marbles. And you know, I was brand new teaching. And one of the teachers said, you know, Lisa, that's a great idea, bringing in marbles. It's kind of nostalgic for me. It's you know, as kids brought marbles to school, similar to trading cards, Pokemon, you know, trading things, trying to think of something relevant right now, you know, so it's important for even me to stay up to date with what's interesting to you as my students in media right now, so it's relatable, because who wants to listen to somebody that has no relevance in their own lived experience and world? Is kind of dull, right? Okay, I don't want to digress too much. So we've got age appropriate, anti-biased approaches. People will go, well, what's an anti-biased approach? Well, think about, we've been learning all about anti-biased approaches, right? So last week, you learned about identity. And with identity, you've got to understand, you know, what culture is, what language, and how language really is a part of a person's identity. And not being able to speak the language that you feel connected to, or to learn languages because you want to feel connected to people, or you want to be able to communicate and understand how different groups of people live and learn together. Is a beautiful thing. Stretching our empathy, you know, abilities, right, to learn from people deeply. That is an anti-bias approach, being open to new things, hearing different languages, you know, attuning our ear. Let's attune our ear to different languages. One thing I used to do, I still do it actually. I talked about this last week's lecture. Watching a movie in a language that you are not completely proficient in, or a language that you're not proficient in at all. Turning on those captions. What it does is it creates more of a sensitivity for me. I'm going to talk about my lived experience. It creates more of a sensitivity to hear different languages being spoken. So when I'm out in public, maybe I'm not necessarily understanding what people are saying, but I'm not unnerved or uncomfortable being around folks that speak different languages, look different than me. I don't see them as subhuman, less than myself. And believe it or not, when we stay connected just to people who look like us, people who sound like us, people who think the same things as us, someone else coming in to that circle, it could make us almost feel like to the point of fearful. right? Fearful. And if media is showing us people that look like that and sound like that, this is how they behave, you have a reason to fear. That's why it's so important to really condition ourselves to what we listen to, even music. Listen to music in different languages. Spotify now, you can take the language, the lyrics, and you can ask it to be translated through Google. I mean, wow, the sky's the limit on how we can really stretch our empathy muscle. Okay, so that really does create, having anti-bias approaches like that, really creates opportunities for us just to have an optimal learning environment. When I think of optimal learning environment, I think of where every single child is able to use all their senses, because not every child has all their 5 senses, right? So all their senses in order to reach their highest learning potential. And that is not really subjective, because we can measure high learning potentials, impacts, right? We do that, and you get it through your, when you write a reflection paper, and I'm giving you, hey, feedback on that was really great. You've hit there. Here's an area to think about improving. It's an opportunity for us to really be able to self-assess as an educator alongside the child and what our desired outcomes are for the child. If I have 10 children in my class and 6 of them are not hitting the metric of let's say it's a social emotional metric of being able to express themselves when they're frustrated. Out of those 6 children, I've got let's say they're 4 years old. They've been with me for 8 months. So school year's coming to a close and they're still struggling. I would be really reflecting, what approaches am I taking in order to yield opportunities with soft landings, right? Which means like it's a low risk because it's group care. It's an opportunity for children to learn how to exchange different types of dialogues with one another, even with really strong emotions and feelings and the voice elevated, right? Being able to get them to understand kind of like, sometimes, it's important for children to also understand social expectations out in the public. And because there is a social decorum that's expected, for people. You're not gonna, hopefully you don't think it's proper decorum when you're frustrated, go up to somebody and just smack them in the face, right? There's an expected decorum on how we carry ourselves and how we speak to people. It can get to a point where we're assimilating, so we're neglecting who we are. That's dangerous. But there is something about how we engage with one another in our society, that we can still be kind and loving and not lose who we are. But we don't need to be angry about it to the point where we can't even progress. I think one thing that's so invaluable for us to learn as human beings is the ability to listen to somebody who doesn't think anything like us, but not to become so angry that you stop forgetting they're human and you stop forgetting how to work with them. That's the true goal of diversity, folks. That's the true goal of diversity. People that have such different polarizing opposite ideas than you and me, us, we, how do we get to the place where we can have conversations so we can really have hope for the future generations? How do we get to that place? Well, it starts with knowing our identity, knowing our triggers, and the value of diversity, okay? So the other piece of the course objective that I really want us to look at, okay, is this: evaluate the impact of personal experiences and your social identity and teacher effectiveness. Everything I just talked about. Everything I just talked about. Who you are is how you work. Who you are is how you engage. Who you are and what you've been through. It's part of what makes you you. Okay? All right. Student learning objectives connect to this diversity goal. And I want you to see this because I am still a college student. I'm finishing my dissertation this year. Woo! Wish me well. Thank you so much. I feel the love. Student learning objectives are so important for me, and course learning objectives. Course learning objectives, it's like, is the teacher building a curriculum that really is hitting the course learning objectives? This is why I took the course. I want to know from you in real time. Don't wait for evaluation. Tell me. Lisa, this is great. This is hitting. This makes sense. This doesn't. I need more explanation. I try my best to be in service to you, but I want you to know that you have that ability to come to me and tell me what's really making sense for you or not. We are going to get into quality teaching and learning practices specifically that will help you grow your learning environments, and you as a person, your own teaching practices, some ideas and tips to get you to the place where, okay, now I'm a teacher, I'm in a classroom. How do I continue to cultivate myself as a facilitator of education, creating third space opportunities for my children and families and colleagues, can't forget about colleagues, so that I can be this anti-bias, I want to say love warrior, right? A love warrior uses their gifts to make the world a better place. That's what I aim to be. Okay, so I digress. You know, if you've listened to my lectures, you know, sometimes I digress, but I come back. Student learning objectives, so important, so important, so important. I want you to know that the student learning objectives that you are learning is all intertwined in these discussions, in these reflections, in your assignments. So please know I spend a lot of time aligning these objectives, okay, the course objectives, the student learning objectives, to finding activities that really help to cultivate these learning objectives and the course objectives, okay? So it's not busy work. I don't want you to see as busy work. And that goes back to me saying I'm a student, meaning I'm a student as well. I don't like busy work. Everything I do has to make sense, or I don't want to do it. I know, it's one of those things in this complicated world that we live in. Can't we take a course that is really about what we want, okay, and not just busy work? I hope this course you find that way. All right. So the objective that we're going to be focusing on for this one, like we're diving into this, okay, is the objective 2. It's where you can really critically assess the components that you've explored, okay, so far, and you think about it as that developing anti-bias detective skills, as Dermis Sparks talks about, okay? Dermis Sparks talks about anti-bias education for young children and ourselves. That's in that. You'll see this as a reference for you, so you can look it up and dive a little bit deeper, but really making it personal for you, okay? And in that other, that other student learning objective that I want us to focus on, because I think it's so important, and oftentimes we don't focus on some of this stuff. And I think part of it is probably because we, I don't know, sometimes, we just want to get through the work. I know some of you have multiple classes and you're working and you have families and you just have lots of stuff. You're a student and this is the thing that you're doing right now. It's still a lot. It's still a lot to manage. So I want to make sure that these objectives are obtainable for you. So I want you to be able to go, okay, this assignment, I understood it. Look at my feedback. I try my best to give you really good feedback. Here's the area I need to improve. Let's say the area that I've been writing for you is you need to be more personal, more lived experience examples. And I'll have students ask me, why do I have to share about my lived experience? It's not that you have to share about your lived experience like when you go out into the field, but for class, you should be sharing about your lived experience as much as you're comfortable with. Just hear me out here. So you understand how our lived experiences can trigger sometimes different parts of who we are that stop us from learning, okay? And that's an ongoing, lifelong thing. I am triggered, and all the time, if I haven't had enough sleep, and even with that, sometimes that doesn't matter, but it does help to improve who we are when we take care of ourselves more. And I know it's hard. I know it's hard, believe me. Personally speaking, I know it's hard. So I want you to also focus on, how that social identity, because this is really the part about the student learning objective. Like, okay, here I am as a person, Lisa Wilson, here's my heritage, my history, right? We talked about that, the toggling between our social identity toggles between our past, what we hope to become, and who we are. So being present is so necessary, because if we don't stay present, I know, like myself, I have struggled with thinking about the past too much, wanting to think about it so much, can't change any of it. So what can I do right now to make sure that my future is different, right? Because if we stay in the past too long, we get into those places of depression. But if we live in the future, only in the future, and we're only thinking about the future, sometimes that can even create a bit of anxiety for us. So there's a balance here. So as you're going through this process of teaching in diverse society, and I say process meaning this course, and why I build the course the way I build it is I'm looking at all your reflections, I'm looking at the feedback, and the thing that has stood out from last week to this week through our identity, through our identity journey, our personal identity journeys, is being able to really understand, who am I? Why do I care about teaching in diverse society? You're here because you care, right? I mean, there's a lot of courses you could take at Ventura Community College, and you chose this course. One, I'm excited you chose this course because I get to know you. Two, you chose this course. Do these student learning objectives, are these student learning objectives something that you're like, I believe in this for my practice eventually? This is going to make me a better person, understanding how my personal experiences and my social identity impacts how I treat people around me right now in real time. Think about that. Think about how amazing that is, that you're on this journey. We're on it together, where you can start to cultivate different parts of yourself so you can have deeper relationships with people, have more meaningful relationships with people, that you're not wasting your time with all kinds of people in your life really that might not want the best for you. And you're able to do that by really knowing who you are and what you want, and how your lived experiences is really impacted why maybe you put up boundaries. Boundaries are healthy and good and necessary, but sometimes those boundaries we put up stop us from getting to that third space, that place of really being able to say, okay, what's this person thinking? Why are they thinking this? How should I respond? That's tough to do. I find that very hard to do for myself personally. But I do find that if I don't cultivate that skill, it's going to be almost impossible for me to collaborate with others, for me to learn, and for me to improve my practice. Okay, student learning objectives, hopefully they're hitting. Hopefully you see in the reflections, the discussions, the assignment this week, hopefully you see how these student learning objectives are being met for you personally. Okay, there's hope. Oh, wow, look at that. Here it is, entering into our story today. We're talking about hope for the future, that toggle between how do we acknowledge the past, stay present, be hopeful for the future, but we don't live in the past. We don't live too much in the future, but we're present. We hold ourselves accountable. We hold one another accountable, and we really start to understand where people are coming from. But I have learned recently the power of hearing someone else's perspective, trying my best to be quiet when they're talking about what they're going through in relation to me. It's not something that I'm I would say an expert in, far from it. I think this is an emerging skill for me. So being able to really identify, wow, this is a skill I'm really great at. Some of you, I read all your papers and your discussion posts, and they've been wonderful, really insightful. And things that have really stood out to me is your willingness to want to explore these ideas of identity in the last one, right? And I put some diversity components in there too, and really wanting to explore some of these things. And you got to think to yourself, why do I want to explore this? Why is this something that's drawing my attention? Even this course. What about this course is something that I can apply to my regular life right now? Okay. And this is the incredible part. I mean, imagine, this is the hope. This is the hope, folks. Imagine a world where we live in, where every child feels a sense of belonging and love. They're celebrated. But let's take it a step further. Imagine living in a world where children and families feel a sense of belonging, and they feel loved and supported, and they can be their full authentic self. Let's take it another step further. Imagine a world where everyone feels a sense of love and belonging, and that they matter, and they can be their authentic self. That's beautiful. We're not there, But I do believe education, and especially early childhood education, is a lever of hope. And so that's why I do what I do. So just think to yourself, why is this important to me? Why does this matter? Okay. So I think for this, I always, this is kind of going off of what I just said. This is like the world, Um, I just put this in a little AI generator for a graphic. A world that looks like love in a classroom, and this is what I came up with. So I just thought I'd share that with you all and kind of extending our thinking about how we can cultivate our mind to see people as human, even when they're so different than us. So we're not stopped with our stereotype threats. We don't follow them. We don't make them realities a stereotype threat. We really deal with people individually. We love them. We love them for who they are. And I think that's so important because with all the different languages and all the different cultures, right now, some people may go, well, we're all human beings. We're the human race. And why do we have to talk about differences? Why do we have to embrace diversity? Isn't that what gets us in trouble? Well, I think there's a balance. I don't think it's yeah, that's true, or no, that's totally not true. There's that third space there, folks. There is. I feel like sometimes if we focus too much on differences, and this is not talking about embracing diversity, let's not get my words mixed up. When we're only focused on differences, okay, we stop seeing the human. So really diversity is about accepting the human first and then acknowledging and loving their differences. That's really what's important when it comes to diversity. And that's really like how we foster and cultivate spaces where children can really reach their highest learning potential, where they feel that they are able to make a difference in this world and that their lives matter. Okay, so we have to start with ourselves first. So when it comes to inclusive and age-appropriate approaches, I talked a little bit about age-appropriate, but I didn't talk about inclusive. And I think when it comes to inclusive, we have to understand that even though we may speak English, okay, and maybe the dominant language spoken in your program is English, there's families that come and their language at home, they speak Spanish, they speak Farsi, they speak, Arabic, they speak Black English. All of those things come into your classroom. How beautiful would it be to embrace that diversity and find ways to honor and affirm a child's identity and a family's identity by having it reflected in the learning environment? Pictures on the walls, families coming in reading stories. Make sure your library has different books with all kinds of representation from children that look like the children in your classroom and children that don't look like the children in your classroom. So I've worked with programs who are like, Lisa, everybody here is kind of the same. How do we bring in multiculturalism? That's tough without making it kind of a tourism approach, right? Like, oh, it's Cinco de Mayo, we're all going to wear sombreros. And if you know anything about Cinco de Mayo, that's not what it's about. But oftentimes you see programs doing that, and they're trying in the best way they know how, because I do believe most of people try, they're giving their best. And when we start to believe that most people are really trying their best and giving their best, we tend to not be as critical or give them a little more grace. Okay, we don't cut them off and go, oh, they should know better. We give them more grace. Okay, I don't want to digress. I want to make sure I hit this point about that inclusive piece. Being inclusive is so necessary. And we're talking about disability inclusion, but we're also talking about inclusion of culture and language. That we're talking about all of it. So we want to make sure our learning environments really hone in on that they magnify in a beautiful way the tapestry of what makes us human, what makes us Americans, what makes us Mexicans, what makes us, whoever we are, whatever we believe. Like the children feel that sense of love and safety and security and belonging. And we only do that by welcoming in their identities into our classrooms, into their learning environments. So this is another thing that's really great is you're awesome. Who you are, what you bring, your personal lived experiences, it brings about your uniqueness, right? It's your narrative. It's your own personal narrative, how you understand yourself and your life. You know how many times I've had people try to tell me that they know me better than I know myself? which sounds just absolutely ludicrous when you think about it. For someone to say, I know you better than you know yourself, they might have a perception of who I am, right? But oftentimes when people say that, they've really kind of put you in a box. They no longer can see you grow. They no longer can accept you for your humanistic side of you. They have a certain idea of you. And if you don't fit into that box, they kind of just stop loving you, stop wanting to be around you. Those kind of people that do that, you have to guard yourself against that. I've learned that it's very healthy to make sure that people around you that say, oh, I know you better than you know yourself. That's a form of wanting to not help you. It's really not that. It's a form of trying to control your narrative. So your own personal narrative and your own personal experiences are yours. And no one knows you better than you know yourself. I wish somebody would have told me that a long time ago, because I feel like I've learned that a lot more recently, is when we allow too much power and control in our life over other people and what they think of us, we stop really knowing what we're great at and areas that we can improve on, okay? We allow too much criticism to come in when we should really be celebrating some things about us that are great. So you can't have too many people in your corner that are hypercritical. Some are necessary because iron sharpens iron. You ever heard that saying? You know, someone that's really good at something you want to be good at, surround yourself around people that are really good at something you're not great at, and that helps you to improve like just your skills, who you are. So know you're awesome. Know that, you know, in your story, in this journey, in your life story, you've got to really start thinking about how this helps to kind of frame out how your unique experiences plays out in the classroom, plays out in your everyday relationships and interactions. Okay. So, and this is really important in group work. It's really important in group collaborative work. And in education, there's lots of opportunities to collaborate. You might have experienced this through your current job, that like you have to do something as a team and a meeting, and it can be hard because you're not really knowing where someone comes from. Or, you know, sometimes what we do is we put people in boxes. We just we subject them to that. Okay. Because based off of maybe one or two interactions we had with them, it's like, that's how that person is. And we kind of just write them off. Some of that is a protective factor. We do that so we don't overthink things, ruminate over stuff. Some of that's healthy. Some of it we have to be careful that we're not negating an opportunity to grow more as a person. And I've learned one thing how to really cultivate the difference, understand the difference, and what to cultivate with feedback is think about what you're good at. This is something I learned, that I had the wrong people around me when I couldn't even really understand what I was good at anymore, because I had too much criticism around me, right? Haters gonna hate. Just remember, you're awesome. Who's awesome? You're awesome. All right. So social identity, teaching effectiveness. I kind of feel like I went into this a little bit, but I really want you to understand the importance of embracing who you are, your identity. You're beautiful. You've been created unique. You're special. You want to make sure you take that and you show who you are in your classrooms. Okay. It's really important to do that. It's important for you to share about your success stories. When I was reading your Padlets, lots of you were sharing about traumas that you've experienced as young people. A lot of you shared even more in detail in the discussion post, things that you personally have been through and how you've overcome it and how there's hope for you. Sharing about those, that's a success, right? Sharing about those stories, like don't stop believing. Remember I played that song? Don't stop believing in yourself, okay? You're here, you're worth it, and you can do it. And sharing your story is going to help someone else. That's the beautiful part. It's going to help someone else. It's going to help the children in the classroom. It's going to help the families that you are in community with. It's going to help. It's going to support your colleagues, believe it or not. When you are true to yourself and you know who you are and you know what you like and what you don't like and what you're not going to put up with, all that stuff is so important too for collaboration. I've learned that. Man, there's some things that I'm really good at. There's some things I don't want to get better at, right? So I need to bring somebody in and collaborate with me, help me out so I can just be more effective in my work. And so integrating anti-bias education and practice, we're going to get more into this in future modules where I'm going to give you like real specifics, really specific things that you can do that are quality teaching and learning practices, that are developmentally and age appropriate and inclusive practices to brighten your classroom and make it this incredible anti-bias environment for all children that cultivates love and safety and belonging. Like that's what we're going to get to. You're going to have like real specific things you can do, but it cannot be performative. So sometimes my students get in my class and they go, well, where's the practices? When am I going to get something like that'll help me build curriculum? Remember, you give who you are, right? So if you know who you are, what you value, what's important to you, how you look at others, how you honor people that are different than you, that's going to be easy for you to find curriculum and materials that's going to cultivate that mindset. But you got to have the right mindset first. You got to know, wait a minute, am I just bringing in a whole bunch of books because I think that's what I should be doing? Or am I bringing in these books in my library because I've taken time to really read about the author, that the author is a person of color? Let's say you're going to put more books in the classroom that have really good Black male representation. Well, is the author a Black male? Some people will go, why is that important? Well, why wouldn't it be the most important thing? Of course, we want authors that are of the same racial ascribed identity, maybe not the same gender, but it would be nice. So if it's a male author or is a Black author, but it's important that there's that intersection there. So there's also giving back to a community that knows about themselves. One thing that's very harmful is integrating anti-bias, tools and practices and, curriculum without doing the background of knowing where it came from. So knowing where things come from is important. This is ongoing. This will always be a part of your teaching journey. Like I said earlier, love warriors, right? So it's all about being that love warrior. How can I use my gifts to make this world a better place? How can I ask other people who are better at something than I am, right? How can I get them to help me out so I make sure I have the best classroom ever? All right, folks. Well, the Peanuts have been here with us the whole time. They've been hanging out because they used the creator of the Peanut Gang. He used his opportunity, his status, his platform to make a difference in media. There's a cool assignment on that. So hopefully you'll really take time and enjoy it. But for now,